Hello, and welcome to Redefine Parenting. I am Veenu Keller. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Networks and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV, channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, please make sure to rate and leave a comment. This app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. So today is very special to me. Um, as we wrap up Mental Health Awareness Month in May, I thought that this would be a great topic to bring forward. Many people know my story because I've been very public about it. I've actually gone to schools all over the country speaking about suicide awareness and bullying and self harm. And I had spent 21 years of my life contemplating suicide. And one of the stories I share with people is the day that I told my mom I wanted to commit suicide. And knowing that she spent every minute of her night checking on me to make sure I'm still breathing because she didn't know if she was going to take me seriously. Was this a cry for help? Because this is back in the 80s. You know, we didn't have social media. We didn't have cell phones where people can call and say, hey, check on Veenu or whatnot. It was, we had regular phones and that was it. There was no other contacts. If, you know, my mom couldn't ring my cell phone up in my room and say, hey, are you good? It was literally walking up the stairs, put her hand over my face, make sure I was breathing. And, you know, I was serious. That was the day that she didn't know that I attempted it. And I had a friend that saved me. And what I've realized over the years is the sense of loneliness, the sense of feeling that I don't belong somewhere, the sense of feeling like there was no peer group that was inviting me to go out, that I was invited to be a part of, and the impact it had on my life of how some people had this expectation of me, some other people had this expectation of me, and I didn't know what my own expectation was of myself, and I just felt like a failure. I felt like nothing I was going to do was ever going to be better in this world. My internal language became what I kept hearing my entire life about bullying, about being ugly and how no one would ever marry me and I was going to be lonely. And the thought of just being lonely the rest of my life, if this is how I felt at 13, 15, 16, how am I going to feel as an adult lonely? And it cascaded into this constant exit strategy for myself. And then I found myself married and I had kids. And now I had to learn how to be a parent. And that kept me alive. And, you know, it wasn't until I realized I went to an event in 2007 that changed my life. And I realized that I was going to live until the good Lord took me away at at his choice, not mine. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I'm so glad that I made that commitment to myself, not only to myself, but to the world and what I'm doing. And when I met our guest, Deborah, I met her at an event recently. I'm really close to her brother. As a matter of fact, I said, oh, he's my big brother. And she gave me permission to share him as a brother now. And, you know, I knew her story from her brother, but I didn't meet her. And to come eye to eye with her and just have a deep discussion and how open she was to tell me about the loss of her son, it was like my world just collided. To hear a story about somebody and then meet them and then hear it from them, it was like so surreal for me. And it was almost in this moment of I felt her pain as a mom, but I also felt her son in that moment as well because I lived it. And it's like when you live that moment, you get it.
Mm.
You get it. And I brought Deborah on today because I she's so brave and she wrote this beautiful letter about her son to help other parents. Like we can say what are the signs that we're missing and what not. And I'm going to let Deborah share her story and you'll see that sometimes there are no signs until after
Mhm.
and then we start to realize what we missed. So Deborah, I'm just going to give you the mic now to allow you to share, you know, what led up to it, what you feel, what happened, and then where we're at now.
So, thank you so much for having me on. I definitely, I believe that nothing happens in life. Everything I live on purpose, so
Mm,
everything in life has a purpose, and we don't necessarily have to like anything that is happening to us for it to have a purpose. So, um, I have to share. I am a mom of six, and I've been married for, it'll be 22 years in July. And in my world, I went to college. I didn't have, it was eight of us. So you met my brother Stephen, but it was eight of us. And so I come from a very big family, and just foundationally feel like I knew, I mean, I had normal adolescence, teenage years, crazy, doing what I wanted to do. And so, when I decided to have a family and get married, I was going to do everything that I knew right. If that makes sense. I'm going to bring my
Yes, it
kids
does.
up, and I'm just going to do what's right, whatever that means of a model family. And I went to school, got my education, and all of that. Graduated from college, got married. And definitely I was in my 20s when I had my son. And I have five girls, and John Boy was the only boy. And the girls, actually, my girls named him John Boy. We didn't even name him John Boy, and poor thing. And he was a kid who, when he was little, I would say, go get your boots. He said, they're not boots, they're shoes. So he was very meticulous, very structured, he just, things had to be a certain way. And I'll never forget this weekend, November 2021, which was this past November. It was, I was away in Minnesota. I worked for Stephen, and we were doing our annual kind of end of the year thing. And I would remember sitting there in our meeting, and I felt really sick to my stomach, and I just started feeling really ill. And I was like, okay, something's, going on. I wasn't sure. And about that, later on that day, I'm like, something's just not right. So I was like, well, I woke up that morning, and I just clearly heard, you need to go home. And I'm like, okay, go home. Okay, I'm not supposed to leave till Monday. I'll leave Sunday. And it was like, no, today, go home. And I literally changed my flight, and the team could tell something was going on. And I got to the airport, and I called a couple of friends. Hey, would you pray for me? Something's going on. I'm not sure what's wrong. And I got home. Everything seemed pretty normal. Okay. My husband was traveling, and the girls were all there. My oldest daughter was there from college, and she was watching my younger kids. And I have twins. They're almost 5. And so everything seemed pretty normal. That when I got home, and I felt relieved, I'm like, okay, maybe I just needed to be home. And about that Sunday morning, we woke up, and I said, I'm going to take them to breakfast like I normally do. I normally would go to church, but I'm going to just would spend time with the kids. That was what I felt to do. And I took pictures. And I yet to have shared that picture, because it was my last picture of all of them at the table. But I always would take them to the breakfast, and I would take a picture of them at breakfast. And my son was disconnected. He didn't want to go with us. My oldest wrestled him out of bed. Come on, you going with us? And he had his hoodie on the whole time, and he was kind of fighting with the girls, kind of bit, just very disconnected with us. And even at breakfast, he had his hoodie on. He wouldn't talk, and I was like, okay, this is strange. But I really didn't know. I was like, well, maybe he was out late. I knew he was out late with his friends. I'm like, well, maybe he's just just being a teenager. And I'm just going to be very honest with you. Boys are different. I have all girls and one boy. So I just kind of always let him be aggravated, irritated, and disconnected, because I felt like, that's just what boys do. I only had one, so I don't really have a lot of experience. And, boys aren't super chatty. Girls are going to demand what they want. So boys can get lost in the shuffle, if you will. And he had just turned 18 years old in October 2nd. And I really, honestly, he was in his senior year. And as I look back at the school year, when we talked about college, He was like, I'm not going to college. When we talked about the future, it made him afraid.
Mm.
You could tell that there was, and I was starting to talk to a lot of different friends because I saw he was just not wanting to. Every time we talked about the future, I could see him withdraw a little bit. And so going back to that Sunday, it was time for us to take our daughter back to school, and my husband had made it, and we are in the car, and I had left him at home, which wasn't uncommon. I always kind of leave him at home because he's just not wanting to go, and so I left him at home, and my husband halfway down the road got sick and said, "Take me back home. I don't feel good. My blood pressure is up." And I'm like, "We're all," and I'm being a crazy lady. Like, "Oh, we just left, we can, you can make it." He's like, "No, take me back home." And so we took him back home. And I went in the house and I said, "John, boy, you're going to have to ride with me to take your sister back. I've been traveling. I can't do this drive by myself. I'm going to need you to drive with me." And he was so angry. He was so angry. And I really believe that he had a plan and we had interrupted it again. And this was probably the third time that weekend his plans got interrupted because me
Mm.
coming was not a part of the plan. And just to find out, and this is details I haven't shared with anybody, is that he actually had it planned for Friday.
Mm.
Um, he had been planning all weekend. And he had kind of had some issues with some friends, and there was just a lot going on. I would have to call it he was in the perfect storm.
Yeah.
So many parts of his world that just were
Colliding.
disrupted, and they were colliding. And so we got back home, and he was angry the whole ride back and forth. And it was a normal Sunday. I was in the bed, and I was kind of relieved, like, okay, there's nothing wrong. I go to bed because I'm exhausted from being away. And about 8 o'clock, my husband says, "Hey, would you go get us some Wendy's?" And he would always go get us some food, or, "Hey, can you get the whole family?"
Mhm.
And he went with no problem. And uh, about 9 o'clock, we probably all passed out. We were asleep. And little did I know, he was in the other room sending goodbye texts to all of his friends.
Mm.
And I'll never forget, he would come say goodnight to me every single night without fail. "Mommy, I love you." So he came and hugged me. And I even said to my husband, I said, "I don't need you to ever hug me, because if John Boy gives me hugs like this, I'm good." Like, I cracked a joke. And he said, "I love you." And he gave me a really tight hug. And that was his last words to me. And he went around the other side of the bed and gave his father some dap, like that. And we thought nothing of it. It was our normal routine bed at night. And about in the other room, little did I know, he was sending messages. He was encouraging his friends, telling them who they were going to be. He
Mm.
was, uh, "God's got you." And he had made a decision. And that was hard for me to realize, that he had his struggle and the peace that he had made with himself, and he had sent his sister a text. I mean, it was just kind of it was unreal, like like in a movie type of
Mm.
unreal. And about 11 o'clock, we heard a sound, and my daughter, who's 15, came in the room and said, "Mommy, did you hear that?" Her room was right across from his, but his door was closed. So I said, "Yeah, I kind of heard that, but maybe it's just something fell off the wall." And we all went back to sleep. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, the police knocked on our door and said, "I think you need to check on your son." His girlfriend called and said he's been sending weird texts. And I walk in the room, and there he was. And so, um, to this day, I can tell you there is nothing in my existence could have ever believed that I would encounter this journey.
Mm. Mm. And, I think that, first of all, thank you for being so raw and real. Like, I always get tears in my eyes when I hear the story. And it's different. It's different when you know somebody versus reading it on the news or, reading about it, or somebody tells you that they have a friend that did it. Like, it's so surreal just knowing you and knowing your heart and knowing like what you're doing in the world to make an impact in other people's lives. So just thank you for just being so raw and real. And, I know that this is especially hard for you right now because as we got on today, you said, Veenu, I made a commitment to you, so I'm here. But I've been silent for a couple weeks. I've been having a hard time. That I feel like another cycle of grief has just hit me, and I just would love to know, because I think that people think that, okay, we go through something, we get over it, we move on, we find the gift, we heal from it. And, I know that, John Boy wants you to, you know, be strong, love, and, live his legacy for, his sisters and yourself and your husband. And yet the healing is still happening. And so I think parents need to understand that, like, it is okay to give yourself some grace and to know that you're going to have your strong days and then you're going to have your not so strong days. And can you just maybe share a little bit about like what you've been going through the last 2 weeks? Because I know you said it kind of stemmed from graduation and prom and everything.
We made it through Christmas, and that was different. And a part of my personality is trying to see the glass half full, trying to see the brighter side, trying to remain strong, I guess, to realize, and I do believe that God uses everything. So that's my faith is what centers me. But I think one of the things that I am learning is my humanity.
Mm.
And a lot of us don't embrace our humanity to realize that there is a very, although I have a strong faith, the last few weeks, I have to say, um, it was as if when it was time for the year to end of school, it was there's his school decided to do a memorial in his honor, and they planted evergreen, and they planted a garden. And I think that that was my pivotal crash because it was the reality that this part of my journey of with him was over, of his end as it relates to high school, as it relates to all of the memories that I would do so much in my, I have an oldest daughter. So I would do a lot of special things for them around this time. And I was excited about, and, I gave all of them the eighth grade graduation. So to realize his eighth grade graduation pictures actually showed up in my feed, and I'm like, oh
Mm.
God, 4 years, and thank God for Facebook memories that they wipe you out every day, every time. And I was a sharer, so I shared every memory about my kids. I loved sharing their journeys, and he was a basketball player. And so this last few weeks have been probably the most difficult for me because it was a realization that these memories that I were special to me of mile markers, I wasn't going to be have the opportunity to share those with him.
Wow. Kind of just brings it back again, right? It just brings back those. And it's so interesting because through all of our journeys in our life, we think we get through something, and then something like hits you and it's like, wow, like it brings you right back, like opens up that wound one more time,
Mhm.
right? That
Yeah,
you think is healing.
yeah, yeah.
And so, I think that one of the most important things is that you said is that if somebody would have told you this was what was going to happen, there was no way you could have foreseen it. I mean, he got you Wendy's, he had conversations with you. I mean, in that moment, I think all of us can say that, yeah, she didn't miss a beat. Like, she didn't miss a sign. It wasn't like, I mean, I know you shared in another story, like he was cleaning up his room, he was doing laundry, like normal teenage stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
get ready for your week. And so looking back now, what is it that, like, what are some of the signs? Because I know that this might help other parents. Like, what are some of the things that parents can, what are we missing?
I would say isolation. And I would say the last 3 months of, I think that one, we never knew that there was going to be this thing called a pandemic. And we never really understood how it was going to impact our children. in a way that socially, emotionally, what isolation does to them. We never really understood that they had a community of people, that a part of their development was their high school experience,
Yeah.
was a part of their social interaction. We think that education is everything, but we don't realize that education and social are, they go hand in hand. And I
Mhm.
honestly, I can tell you, I can show you pictures of his eyes from the time COVID started, the child he was from freshman and sophomore year, to his pictures when you see him junior year, going into his junior year, and coming out looking at his senior, his homecoming pictures from senior year. You will see such a shift in a child, of not just his happiness, his sadness. He kind of was sad all the time. And some conversations that I was sharing with my husband that me and him had. He worked at Arby's, and I would drive him back and forth if he couldn't use my car or whatever. And we had a couple conversations, and he was like, "I don't like people anymore." He was like,
Mm.
"I don't trust anybody." And that's not normal. Like, you don't like nobody. And I realized he had started pulling himself away from some of his core friends, and was kind of shifting into this another world. And what I guess, everyone's child is different, but one of the things that I know is not okay is isolation, when your children don't want to interact with anyone. And I mean, to the point where they begin to build a world that is um, outside of it almost. And because he was a gamer, and I do have a caution for parents that allow their children to spend 8 and 10 hours on a game. I do caution. And the reason why is because what I didn't learn about till after he was gone, what there was a whole nother world that he was a part of. And think about your 14, 15-year-old, your 10-year-old talking to adult men all the time, or adult gamers, and they're being all of that, and they have the headphones on. So you don't have any clue that they're
Mhm.
being cussed out on a consistent basis, or the language and the exposure. And that was one of the things that I say, is that if you're going to allow your child a game, be a part of their gaming world. If not, if you're not going to, it's with anything that doesn't have restraint, like it doesn't have boundaries. And those were one of the things that I learned a lot more than I wanted to know about his gaming world. And it was heart wrenching to find out some of the things that I was exposed to in the gaming world.
Can you share some of that? Because I mean, I'm even curious because I work with, I work with kids, right? Like on a daily basis, I'm coaching teenage kids and I'm coaching these parents and I'm telling them like you got to put boundaries around these video games. And I said, when you want to spend time with your kids, do what they want. If they like the video games, get in the video games so you can understand their model of the world, because we keep trying to pull our kids in our model of the world the way it was. We're not living in the way it was. We're living in a new dimension of this world, this country, everything we're dealing with. And so I'm even curious, like, what are some of the findings that you found? Like, share with us. So, because I have twins too that are becoming 10 next month, and they're just getting into a little of the roadblocks and stuff. Thank God that's it yet. And my older son's like, Mom, let him get on PS5, let him like get on the internet and I can play this game with him. And I'm like, no, Connor, he's not. And he's like, come on, Mom, you're too strict. You're too strict, Mom. I said, he's only at 9. He's only 9. He doesn't need to get on the internet. You want to play with him? Come over here and play with them, but I'm not letting him get on. And then I have like pressure from like other parents, like, oh, Veenu, it's not a big deal if he's playing with his brother. Like, help me to back up my story why I'm saying no.
What was interesting? One is there is no boundaries. It's limitless. And so there are adults that play for money. And my son has started playing for winning awards and monies, but he was playing with people all over the world. And I think that the Discord and the Twitch and all of those worlds, they're not concerned about your children. They're concerned about, it's a money making, membership driven app or platform. And so one of the things that we were kind of going through the computer, and it was like, it would be like, if I get 10 likes, I'm gonna kill myself. If it was like suicide was like became normal. It was like a norm. It was like, think about dying in a game. You're just dying. It's not really a big deal. So there's a disconnect of reality versus real life. I promise you, if my son really understood the impact and how this would impact our family, that wasn't his heart. That wasn't, but somewhere he became numbed
Mm,
to what was real
for sure.
versus what wasn't real.
Mm,
And I'm not saying that he what was delusional, but I on many levels, I think that the pressures and the different dynamics, I'm talking about over time. I'm talking about progressively, something made him very comfortable in the decision to say, you know what, I don't have to do this anymore. And so I think that it's not to say that video games are bad, but I feel like as a parent, one of our jobs is to help provide structure and boundaries and to see something a little bit differently than what they see. The
mhm.
problem is we've been inundated with so many things you know, I'm guilty. In the back seat they're screaming, I hand them a phone, please be quiet. I mean, we've what the behaviors we as adults, I'm not talking about kids, I'm talking about us.
Yes,
We sacrifice for convenience.
we
And
do.
what are we sacrificing? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. You know what? I get 4 hours of quiet time because I know that child is on a video game at least 4 hours. So I can know they're safe. But are they safe because they're in someone else's world?
Mm,
So if we're gonna be a part of their lives, and God is trusting us with these children and these to bring them up and to help nurture them and give them, are we really unplugging ourselves to for convenience sake to say, well, I'll just hand them a device of something that really we're not a part of. And I guess that it's not a soapbox for me because I really believe every child is different. I believe that the point I want to make is parent engagement, not
right.
go every parent in America go rip the video games out of your child's life. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is we have to be a part of their worlds. And sometimes that causes us to have to be inconvenienced, and it's worth it because somewhere along the line we unplug too.
Mm,
And I had 6 kids and you have 6 kids. So you know about being outnumbered. And it's just like, okay, let me get this one, take care of this one, this one.
right.
And I have to say, I was too busy. And I'm going to admit it. I was just too busy.
And that's where I did a whole talk on presence, and like presence starts with us, and then it models to our kids. And you hit on so many good points, because number one, it's almost like, now we're going into this whole thing called metaverse, and people are watching, concerts on metaverse and stuff. It's like almost like the last 10 years has been preparing us to understand how the worlds are going to morph together. And our kids know this better than we do. I'm going to tell you that right now, because they're living it. They've been sucked into the video game world, understanding first it was a game system, now it's internet, so now you can play with everybody. And I will say, like, when COVID was happening, it was really just difficult, because what happened was that was their only way to connect with people, the
Mhm.
outside world.
Yeah.
And it's like our kids have lost, a lot of them, not everybody, but over the years, I think it's coming back, but they lost that whole way to engage with people face to face, to feel the energy of being someone's presence,
Mhm.
having that joint conversation of watching someone's facial expressions and hearing
Mhm.
them and understanding their gestures, versus just hearing a word and taking a tonality and creating your own meaning of it. And it is understanding their model of the world, and we have to get into it. Like, I have lots of boundaries. I think my husband thinks I'm too strict, but like, even on YouTube, I watch how my kids language changes towards me, and I'm like, I have to remind them, I'm like, I am the mom, like, I am not your friend, and God help you if you're talking to your friends this way too, but you will not talk to me this way as your mom.
Mhm.
And I'm listening in the background noise. Again, I'm not so much get on a video game, but I'm like, okay, go ahead and watch YouTube or whatever, kids YouTube, and the languaging and how these kids are talking to their
Mhm.
parents, how they're playing pranks on each other. That finally, about a month ago, I said, you're only allowed to watch YouTube if it's going to teach you something. Like, teach you how to sew, teach you how to play soccer better. Like, it has to be a tutorial that you're watching on YouTube, or you're not watching YouTube. And I watched both my twins have a breakdown, and I said, you're addicted to it. And that was the
Mhm.
first sign of, like, when you take something away from your kids and they have an outright temper tantrum, a meltdown, because they can't have YouTube, they can't have that video game, there is
Mhm.
an addiction there. And we have
Yeah.
to ask ourselves, what need is that filling? What are they getting from that? And if
Mhm.
they're getting their source of connection and that becomes their internal language. I said something in the beginning with my own story is that my internal language became what the bullies was telling me all these years.
Yeah.
And now the internal language is what they're hearing underneath
That's
those
so good.
headphones. And
That's
it's
so
becoming,
good.
and they, like you said, Deborah, they can't decipher what's reality because they're talking to somebody versus what is preparing them to enter a world that this world is trying to, go in. And I wish I
Yes.
had more information about the metaverse, but I really am trying to not get into it because I don't want that to succumb my life. I don't want this to take over. I want us to bring awareness to, like you said, how do we unplug? How do we, the new word in our question in our life should be, how could I be inconvenienced today to spend more time with my
Yeah.
kid?
Yeah.
How can I be more inconvenienced
That's really
today
good.
to spend more time with my kid, to hear what's bothering them, what's been great? I tell parents all the time, and I'm guilty of this. Like when I raised my two boys as a single mom for like 8 or 9 years, I was working 3 jobs to put food on the table. I lived paycheck to paycheck. And I was still trying to figure out, who am I? Do I want to even live anymore? Because in 2016 was my end date. Like that was the day I was going to go after my son graduated high school. He was the last one I had at the time, and because in my warped thinking, it was, well, I've raised them. I've done my job. They're not going to go live with my ex-husband, who I didn't think was a great influence. So they'll be okay. Little did I know now that they're 28 and 23 and that my oldest one's married and has a kid, they need me now more than they needed me then.
Yeah.
And I did not realize that because in my mind, I thought everybody would be better off without me. We create this story that we get involved in, and we can't decipher if that's really true or is that story that I'm making up for myself true.
And it's interesting you said that you had a cutoff date or a time. He had a cutoff. He said 11 o'clock is my time, my cutoff. He used that word. He said my 11 o'clock, and he did it at exactly 11 o'clock, which leads me to believe, and this was a communication he was having with an individual. And he had told the individual, "You could save me. You're the only person that can." And I dare not disclose, that whole thing. But what I'll say to you is that um, you need to be a part of your kids' friends,
Yes.
because at some point that night, if one of his friends has called me or and said, "Hey, Miss Anthony, hey, I got this weird text from John, and I don't know, could you just? I'm worried about him." He texts like 20 people. Out of 20 people and talking to people, some of those people for 40 and 45 minutes, not one of them called us. And I say that to say is that that's a disconnect too for me, is that I began to, because he was a boy, and of course, girls, you're worried about their boyfriend, right? You're worried about who they're, and the girls are kind of more open to who their social life, but boys kind of have a tendency, you just trust them,
Mhm.
be at home at this time, and he was very responsible. So for me, I kind of had disconnected from who was in his world, and I didn't bring them in like I did with my daughter. Like, who's your friend? Where are you going? What time? And,
Right.
I had to know who everybody was. And so I share that to say is that many times, and as I look at it, and you can speak to the experience of what he might have been thinking or what he could have been thinking. But one of the things I do know is that he had made up his mind. And it was probably, I would say, there was nothing that I could have done. Me and his father was in the next room. And so it wasn't like he didn't know we loved him or we couldn't help him, but it was something within him that felt very strongly this was a decision he had to make. And I don't in any way want to normalize suicide, but what I do want to normalize is parents of my own inability to respond faster. Some of the words that he would say is, "I don't like people." Some of the things that he would say in his isolation, I should have moved. I had counseling appointments, interesting, set up. I didn't move fast enough. And I would tell parents, uh, even if you don't think, even if your child says, "Oh, I'm fine," I would still, we have this thing called intuition that is inside of us. We can
Hmm.
feel things, move on it. And even if you're overreactive, I would rather you overreact than not save their life.
Oh my gosh. I just had a conversation with one of my coaching clients today. She's like, I have this red flag about my son, not about suicide, about something else. And I said, you know what? I rather be seen as the parent that overreacted to my red flags of my mama intuition than find out later that there is a problem and now you have to go deal with that. I
Yeah.
said, you know what? We are their mamas for a reason. We're not here to dictate their life. We're here to guide them. And I always tell parents, be curious, not critical. If we could just get more curious to get more information from them to help guide them. And, and I will just piggyback off what you said. I'm not blaming anybody for not telling you. It's how do we make our kids' friends feel comfortable of coming forward? And you're not a snitch, you're not tattletaling, you're not doing anything but possibly saving your friend's life. I asked my best friend, we've been best friends for 43 years. I talk about her a lot. Her name's Tiffany. And so we've been best friends since we were 6 years old. I'm aging myself right now. And I remember asking her a few years ago, I said, you were the only person that knew I cut. I said, why didn't you tell anybody? And I said, I mean, in the moment, I'm glad she didn't, right? At 15, but I'm just curious now. And she says, because I knew I was the only person you trusted. And if I would
Mhm.
have told, who would you have had in your life? And I didn't want you to do something stupid.
Mhm.
So I knew you trusted me and I needed to keep that with you. And I get chills saying that because that was my truth at 15. That's what the 15-year-old brain is thinking.
Mhm.
Our brains are not developed. Our brains for girls
Mhm.
don't stop developing until 25 and for boys 28. So our frontal lobe, that executive functioning, that reasoning, that understanding that like consequences have long-term effects on our life is not even there.
Mhm.
And that's why we need our parents. Us parents are our kids' frontal lobe right now, especially in their teenage years when they're trying to separate independence of what I know I can do. I don't need you anymore, mom. I'm not a little boy. I'm not a little girl. To I need you. Like I need you
Mhm.
right now to help me pivot and get through this. And, and I know because we've had conversations that you had good conversations with your sons, with your son and your daughters. And what I say is, how do we create that open and safe and trusting space? Is we ask deeper questions. Like I was saying, when I was at single mom, I used to ask my kids, how was school? And they would say, oh, it was good. And I'm like, oh, okay, what do you want for dinner? Right? Like everything is great. I got so much going on. Again, inconvenience. So let
Mhm.
me just get you your dinner. And then get your homework done and you guys know what to do. Instead of saying, well, what was good about it? Did you have any challenges today? Is there anything going on that I can support you on? Any discussion that you
Mhm.
want to have? Like create that. And so that's what me and my husband started doing. Like, when I started this whole get curious, not critical and teaching parents that I'm like, we have to be this is our pivot. This is what we get to do differently with our kids now that they're twins. And we ask that all the time. Like, even in the morning, I ask them questions to put good questions in their mind. What do you want today to look like? And they'll say, oh, it's going to be a great day. What would a great day look like to you? What's your responsibility and ownership in having that great day? And teaching them that. So, and then as soon as they come home, what do? They're like, mom, guess what kind of day I had? I'm like, a great day. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, tell me about it. What specifically was great about your day? So we can have that conversation.
Mhm.
And I want to build that now at 10. So when they are 18 and they are going through things, because God knows what this world's going to look like 8 years from now with this whole metaverse and going more and more electronic, getting away. We're just disconnecting. We're like distancing
Mhm.
ourselves from the world as we know it.
Yeah.
We're all becoming digital. And, I know we had a great discussion on that panel that you had me on in that group. And we were talking about like the responsibility of what teachers are also seeing at school, like what are kids doing at school. Like if you hear something, say something. If there's a conversation you're having with your friend and you don't want your friend to be upset and you're having this conversation and it is awkward, if you don't want to reach out to the parents, reach out to someone else that you
Yeah.
trust. What do you think about this? This is what, John Boy's texting me and like it's kind of weird, and go to your own parents and it create the conversation because you don't know if that conversation might save a life.
Yeah. Yeah. I can say that if I look back at the years, this was a progression of um, of him suffering in silence. And I do have to say that I do think that I'm not going to say he woke up and it was a one day instance. I do think that the future scared him. I
Yeah.
do feel that COVID brought a lot of the if whatever was underlining it kind of brought it to the surface. Whatever, his private struggle, it enhanced it. So I won't say, I don't blame it fully on that, but I will say it, him being at home and having to just kind of sit in the room doing homework all day, and they had loaded them up and they couldn't keep up. Sometimes he was feeling like a failure. A lot of times, sometimes I would be like, what are you doing? And I mean, his grades were crazy. And then he would get them all together and put pressure on himself to get it all together. And so I look at the progression throughout the years of his struggle. And one of the things that I would have done would be to get him some help sooner, to help someone help him navigate the complexity, because he had hard times with complexity. That would be another where he could not sort um, complex things began to frustrate him, and he would shut down and get very quiet. And so those are some of the things. I don't know. Let me say it this way: I don't know where all of my journey is taking me. Let me say that. What I have had to learn to do, to any parent that is experience a child committing suicide, is almost like you have to find a new world and build from ashes, because you what you thought you knew, you think you don't know. And I still have 5 other children that are dependent on me, and to not parent them even in fear of losing another one. Or And so I encourage parents not to parent in fear, but parent with what you know. And if you don't know, find people that do. Many times parents suffer because we feel like we gotta know. Somebody told us we have to know what we're doing all the time. I don't know where we got that from.
Well, hence this, like, that's why I call this redefined parenting, because I feel like this is what it's all about. We have to redefine the way that we parent. We have to, it's not just, and I'm not putting any of the labels down: conscious parenting, mindset parenting, helicopter parenting, like whatever the labels are, let's just take them away and just be the parent your child needs you to be. Because, like you, Deborah, 6 kids, 2 of them are stepdaughters. Like, I have to parent in so many different facets, and each one of them have their own personalities. Like, if I talk to one way, I'm not going to get a response. But if I talk to them this way, I'm going to get a response. And so it's just knowing how to connect with your own child. How do you connect with them? And again, like, even going to like the shootings that we're having, like, that are so devastating on my heart. It's like, people say, oh, well, I saw this post, I saw that post. Then tell somebody.
Mhm.
You're not going to be the snitch. Like, and if you are the snitch and it didn't come out to anything, you know what? You've entered in a world that you're doing something about, instead of being quiet. Be an
Yeah,
upstander, not a bystander. Like, see something, say something, because that's the only way that
yeah,
we're going to be able to come together as a society to start changing that. We have to be able to open up to our friends. And someone left a comment saying, amen, we are not their friend, we are their parent. And it's a fine line, because I have so many parents that say to me, but what if they hate me? They're going to like you tomorrow. Let them hate you today. If they hate you, you're doing something right. If your kids
yeah,
hate you one moment in your life, you've done something right. And I
yeah,
try to tell my kids, no doesn't mean that you ask the wrong questions, or I think I don't trust you, or you know what, I'm just in a mood. No means that maybe we have to have a discussion about it. No means that, hey, I've been there and the results that you want are not going to be in that. No means that I need more information. We have to teach our kids not to be afraid of the word no, and
yeah.
be open to, okay, can we discuss this? Can you share with me? So when a kid asks you why, when you say no, a lot of us, and I know this because I have 6 kids, why to them means, if I get the information, maybe I can manipulate mom to give me that yes.
Hmm.
I would also like to open your mind to why also means that they want to understand the logic of the no. Does no mean we need more discussion? Does no mean that I'm not understanding your meaning and you need to give me a new meaning? So allow your kids to have that discussion, to tell you. And the other thing I want to touch on, we have like 10 more minutes, is that I have clients that do isolate, but it's their normal behavior. They're very
Right.
introverted. They're artists. They like to draw. They like to paint. They write poetry. They have a couple of friends. They make every coaching appointment with me. So they're not isolating from everybody. They do more time with their family now. So they're out of their room. We have their door open now. Like, there's things that we did, and I get why the parents are very cautious. It's like isolation equals depression, depression equals suicide. Not always. I
No.
think what Deborah was saying is her son's generalized behavior changed radically, but it was very subtle in the type of conversations they were having. And, it was just another discussion, maybe because it seems like John Boy was kind of worldly too. Like when he was like reaching out to his friends, going, man, you're going to do this in the future and stuff. He was very futuristic for some people. But is it possible maybe the future really scared him, especially after
Mhm.
COVID? As adults, we have to look at what did COVID do to us. Nowhere in my mind when I started seeing the toilet papers off the shelves and the paper towels that we were
Yes.
going into a pandemic. Like, there was thoughts of lockdowns and this and that. And everyone was like, no, people are being phonetic about it. Like, it's going to be fine. And then a day we wake up and it's like the USA is in lockdown now. Like, we are now
Yeah.
like Italy and all the other countries. And it's like, okay, they can't lock us down more than a week. We're going to have like a week vacation, right? And then
Mhm.
we're into 2 weeks, and then we're into 2 months, and then we're into 6 months. And it's like, are we ever going to be able to get out and know life as we've known it before? And it's like, that was the big pivot. And if we had a problem with it, just imagine what our kids were going through. And we're adults, we can articulate it to people. Some of our kids couldn't,
They
you know,
couldn't.
couldn't find the words of, what, mom, I'm constantly online with this class. I don't feel comfortable staring people face to face. It's hard for people to do that. They're turning off their cameras. Their teachers will make them turn it on. And then all the work and the homework and not having the guidance to know if you're doing it right. And then you watching your grades fail from that. And I'm going to tell you, parents, one thing your kids don't want to do, they don't want to disappoint you.
Right.
They do not want to disappoint you. And the moment they feel they're disappointing themselves, they go into their mind like, if I'm disappointing me, what is that going to look like to my mama or my daddy? So we have to be more supportive. I have parents a lot of times, and, therapists, coaches, we all set our rates, and sometimes they're not conducive to what people can afford. And yet, if people can't afford my coaching, I always give them resources to go to because I want them to get help. You know,
Mhm.
and the other thing is, for me personally, I couldn't put a price tag. I would do whatever it took. If I know this therapist or this coach is the right one for me, and in my gut, just like my gut tells me something's wrong with my kid, they're the ones I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out the
Yeah.
finances because I'm going to choose you to get me through this because I believe in you. The value's there. So, don't let money stop you from getting help.
I have to agree with you, and I think that many times, as we're removing the stigma, um, if you would on the outside looking in, my family looks pretty normal, right? Um, and that's part of the problem. We judge books by their covers, and we look at that. And one of the things is just taking the stigma off of. I coach clients for business, and I help. I actually in the last 2 years, I've helped probably five people, either the life coaching or therapists, create a business. And one of the things that I thought about is when I was working with them, I was like, we have a doctor's appointment for every part of the body except the mind,
Except for the mind.
because we've made it a taboo. We've made it something's wrong with you. I don't want to be categorized like that. I don't want to be stigmatized. And I hope that through my son's journey, that the lid of this thing is taken off
Mm.
completely, and that people will look at my family and say, you know what? It looked like they were doing everything they could have done. But what I have to say is getting kids help ahead of time and getting in front and being inconvenienced to get them help. We will be inconvenienced and sit at a soccer field, a baseball field, a basketball field. We will do everything to make sure they're great in their academia and sports. But this part of it is so critical. And so if I don't have any words or final words to say to anyone that, um, you feel like you're doing everything right, um, get the conversation started, get somebody else involved in the conversation, getting mentors, for your children, and finding someone that they can connect with, that has been where they are.
Mm,
Uh, and one of the things that I've done for myself, in the last 3 weeks, is I'm trying to find a community that can really relate to what I'm going through, because I'm starting to feel a little batty. Like, is this normal? Am I doing grief right? Or is there a right way to do grief? And, are my kids getting what they need? And how I handle it is I stay busy, but am I being healthy for my kids by staying busy? So I'm still in process, and I want to share that, is like, I don't have this thing figured out. And, many times people will look at your strength and equate that to a resolve. And I don't have a resolve. I don't think I'll ever have a complete resolve. I've come to terms with the fact that he is gone. But one of the things that I really believe is this community, Redefine Parenting, is so critical. And we need to make parenting the biggest job ever. Like, right now, our kids need us. And sometimes we allow our marriages, sometimes we allow our jobs and the noise of this life to cause us. And they're the only people that didn't ask to be here,
correct. Yeah, that's what my
period.
son tells me all the time. He's like, I didn't ask to be here. And I said, no, and I'm glad you are, because I'm going to tell you, my kids are my biggest teachers. They, all of them, all six of them, have taught me something about myself and to do better. And if you know better, then do better. And that is so critical. And it is time that we come together and we stop, you know, self-beating. Like, the parent guilt has got to stop.
Yeah.
And my husband even mentioned this the other day. He's like, because I feel worse for giving them this consequence more than they do. And I said, exactly. So you don't give it, and then they have a free will to get on YouTube again, because it's like, well, dad felt bad. So get out of the parent guilt. Be the parent your child needs you to be right now for them in this world today, in this digital world, the social media world. Somebody put a comment saying, smartsocial.com is a great resource for parents to relate to games. I also got the Gab phones for my kids. Like, my kids have phones, but there's no internet on it. I can track them as a GPS. They can call and text just like normal phones used to be, because I want my kids to have the freedom to be able to talk with friends, to talk with me when I'm away. And yet, I don't want them to have the pressure of social media. I have Google Family Link on all their tablets so I can make sure what is going on. Any
Yeah.
message they get, any game they download, it has to go through me. Even if it's a G-rated game, it has to go through me.
Yeah.
And it's inconvenient. Okay. It is inconvenient for my
And
phone.
inconvenient might be it costs the membership or it costs something.
Correct. And you know what? I tell them, when I get a moment, I will look at the game. Like, I'm not just going to approve it without looking at what am I approving, because like you said, like, one of the things I got from this today, Deborah, is we so conveniently tell our kids, you know what, I'll be with you in a minute. That minute turns into an hour, and they're on their tablet or their video games. And we think they're being preoccupied. So it gives us some grace to do what we need to do, because we're not guilty of not spending time with them. And we have no clue what's going in their ears that we can't
It's true.
hear. We have no idea. And so, boundaries. Just like I tell this to parents, your house is your boundary. You lock the door, you feel safe. Without boundaries around our children, how are they ever going to feel safe? How do they know? They don't know how much you care because of what you say. They know how much you care because of what you do, how they feel, the behaviors you have with them in that interaction with them. Take time to hear them. Hear them to understand them. Don't hear them to respond. Don't hear them to judge.
Yeah.
Create that open and safe and trusting space, because the worst fear is losing a child, especially when they
Yes.
had a choice. Especially when they had a choice. So, Deborah, thank you again so much for
Thank
doing
you.
this. Thank you, those that tuned in. I hope that you guys found so much value through this amazing woman's story. Um, Deborah, I'll continue to pray for you to go through
Thank
this.
you.
because that's what you're going to do. You're going to grow through this opportunity. And, you know, his life wasn't in vain. You know, there's something bigger that's happening. And this was his way of contributing to it in his own way. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Deborah. This show can be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.